Hello and welcome to the sideboard here at the StarCityGames.com Columbus Invitational. I am Nick Miller alongside Ken Ketter. How you doing?
Good, good.
Now, you're the Team Lotus representative this weekend, giving us the breakdown on what you guys are playing.
Yes, correct.
You were not at Baltimore, but your
Nope.
team played a green-white tokens deck. Today, you're playing a big white deck.
Yes, absolutely.
Just kind of going beyond mid-range here. You're playing mono white, all the best removal, and the best hits along the curve.
Yep.
All right, so talk about how you made this deck. You worked on it with Tinjum and Chris Anderson, correct?
Correct. So we looked at results from Baltimore, saw that humans was everywhere, and then started to notice that the best cards, the cards that were showing up the highest percentages, across the field, regardless of what people took in week one, seemed to be mostly white cards. And we started to frame, like, how many removal spells do you really need in like a mid-range deck? We realized there was easily like 10, no problem. Or 10 different, a few different removal spells you could play in white that could fill those slots. Knight of the White Orchid, Archangel of Ties, and Avacyn were things that were being accessed in the other, black-white and other such decks. So it all kind of fell together. Gideon's another obvious one, a great one. But the two cards that really push the deck from being, like a concept into we have filled out these slots and we have an actual engine to execute compared to what the other decks are doing was Thraben Inspector, super unassuming, rather good, but Eldrazi Displacer was the big one that just said, hey, we're okay with just being one color here.
Right, that's the card, Eldrazi Displacer is the card that kind of made what the Roanoke team played last week, the white-black Eldrazi deck, hum. And that was the card that just gave the value and everything. You've kind of got rid of the black cards. You've got enough removal in Declaration Stone, Silk Wrap, and Stasis Snare, all white, so you don't have to stretch the mana. And then you get to use Displacer along with Thraben Inspector, which I think is like one of the breakout cards of Shadows over Innistrad that people kind of overlooked. Then they started looking at it and they're like, oh, that's cute. Then people started playing with it and everyone's like, all right, this card's great.
I still have people, they're like, I don't know about Inspector. One of the differences that the team was looking at was some people were advocating Hedron Crawlers. A couple of the guys are on a 2-2 split. I think Thraben Inspector is just exactly what the deck needs. You're on 26 lands. You're just attempting to get to the 4 and 5 drops in the curve because of the power of Avacyn and some of the other threats. And then Displacer, I use it as a 6-drop. Play, activate, same turn. So something like Inspector that gets into play, blocks in the matchups where it's relevant, which is most of them, and then puts you one card deeper is really something that people have forgotten how powerful it is. It's not impressive, but I feel like if we get to our 5th land, especially post-board, if we hit our 5th and 6th lands, I really don't care what the opponents are doing. I feel like I have the tools necessary to win the game. Not every game, but I've got the tools to probably win the game.
Archangel Avacyn pretty much says once you get to 5 mana, play this card, and then if you have Displacer, things are going to be very tough for you.
My last round opponent against Cryptolith writes red-green. I just had Displacer Avacyn, and he was casting Atarkas, and it was like, okay, trigger. So Displacer takes every other card in the deck, every creature in the deck, and makes it better than it needs to be. Because Archangel Ties and Avacyn, even without their coming to play triggers and stuff, just as flying attackers, a lot of decks have like one card to deal with that, and if Displacer invalidates it, they're just like, what do I do? So I tuck the 3 lands underneath whatever creature matters and just sit on it until they show me a way to deal with it.
Right. Of course, you also have Gideon in here. A card a lot of people said, has lost stock. But I think we saw it pop up in a couple of decks last week, and people were like, well, everyone said this card wasn't going to be good, but it's still good. Yeah,
I actually disagree with the assessment that folks were underselling Gideon. I think his ability with Crackling Doom and Abzan Charm, gone. Really, it's only Stasis Snare that punishes the +1 ability. And folks are going to realize pretty quickly that attacking for 5, making a 2-2 and then attacking for 5 is more than enough power in the given format. I very rarely emblem, not to say that it's incorrect, but the +1 is it's almost like that ability was finally unlocked or made legal with the rotation of the old removal. Until you've +1 Gideon a couple times, reserve any sort of judgment, and you can also displace your Gideon if they try to kill it. It's a thing.
Right. Being able to activate Gideon, Displacer it, use it again, is where, again, Displacer just unlocks all of this extra value for your deck, where you're just a bunch of white cards, but once you start going along, you're just going to not be able to keep up with what's going on here.
Not at all, not at all.
Now, your colorless sources of mana, Foundry of the Council, Foundry of the Council, I said it correctly.
Correct.
We saw this pop up in your mono red Eldrazi deck
Yeah.
last season. Just a great value card that turns on your colorless spells, but also Westvale Abbey, a card that Team Lotus, including Chris Anderson, has been hyped on since it's been previewed.
Yeah. Now over the past week, we had a very, like a specific conversation regarding the importance of Abbey in the format. People are aware of it. All of our removal happens to kill it, so like we particularly don't care about the Abbey, but it's becoming more and more apparent there is an Abbey sub-game developing in Standard. If you're a deck that can deal with it, you just ignore it and you deal with it as they come. But I think for as long as Abbey's legal in Standard, there's going to be a valid question of, can I beat a flipped Abbey? And I mean, not to say that, there are a lot of decks that can't, but there are enough that you flip it, it's probably going to take the game over by itself.
Right. And a lot of people I've talked to have kind of acknowledged that exists. And they say, there's a subset of decks in the format that just can't beat it, which is why you want Westvale Abbey in your decks. Sure, these white decks have a bunch of exile effects and can deal with it, but a lot of these decks that do not touch white have a very hard time dealing with Ormondal once it's transformed.
And the deck already needs colorless sources, so obviously it hits it there. And then just making 1/1 blockers or attackers, it really ties into the deck's desire to be shifting roles, to be, the controlling deck. And then once it's gotten to a certain point, it just needs to kind of sit there until the attackers take care of it. So
you've got a Tragic Arrogance here in the main deck. We saw this card shine really out of the white-black decks last weekend. But when you move to the sideboard here, you have a bunch of Planar Outburst Azure Wraths of choice.
Yeah. And the decision there was, game one, you can use Tragic Arrogance just to get a little more variety with the blowouts. I felt like you had to be cognizant of the fact we're still playing 7 enchantments. It's not terribly difficult to just play one and really hold the other one until later. But in the sideboard and the matchups that I wanted the Wraths in and needed to like cast them on 5 and stuff like that, like the humans matchups, I didn't want to leave them with any threat. I understand I could leave them as one threat and I could hypothetically keep one, but Andrew, Tenjum, and I agreed that we wanted to have the most consistent effects possible listed in the deck to give it that, kind of a mid-range type feel. And as much as it'd be great to have Tragic Arrogance, there's a few situations where they definitely make it look, laughable.
Right, you call this the mono-white Jund deck, but just like the modern Jund deck, every card in this deck does what it's best at. Where you want it. So Planar Outburst, of course, allowing you to kill everything, but also make a creature late game. I assume seems pretty good. Linvala, this card's picking up in Steam here, just coming back, gaining life. But also you have the Eldrazi package. Thought-Knot Seer and Reality Smasher in the sideboard, since you have access to so much colorless mana. Where these cards really shine.
Linvala is crucial in your humans matchup. Most of your aggressive matchups, it becomes a pretty easy reset button. And against Bant Company, our strategy, and feel free to write this down, against Bant Company, we just want to attack a bunch in the air. It does that, many times against them. It'll make the 8 power worth of flyers. Gives you a 3/3 for protection against Clip Wings. Linvala also obviously Displacer. You do get to a few situations where, regardless of what your opponent's committing to the board, you get to Linvala or Displacer your Linvala until you can set up like a Displacer with Avacyn, or eventually, and I haven't done it yet, but we did in a little bit of our testing, we got the Displacer, Avacyn, Wrath.
The whole combo.
The whole combo. And that's one small area where you have the 8 mana Planar Outburst plus Displacer. It's kind of nice.
Flicker the Avacyn. My stuff's indestructible, kill everything else. Fittingly, Thought-Knot Seer also pretty good with Displacer.
Yes. Thought-Knot Seer is a fascinating card in that it's going to, for the rest of the time it's in Standard, give a very clean 4-drop where you just board it in against the control decks and you hope it's good enough.
Reality Smasher just when you need to beat down a little bit?
The control decks, you really need to be pacing, up your curve, and you have to be extremely dense on your threats in the 4 and 5 slots because, in a vacuum, Inspector's not that great, Knight's not that great. So having a couple Smashers in the sideboard just lets it where, end of turn, Flash Avacyn, countered, okay, untap. Smasher, attack.
Stormbutt Dragon.
We go up to 6 flash threats, when you count in Secure the Wastes. And then you have Smashers and Thought-Knot Seers and Linvalas for your sorcery speed attackers.
Well, the deck looks very good. You're 4-0 so far through the Standard portion. I'm sure you got something nice for Modern coming up, but we'll really see how the deck shines tomorrow, when the heat's really turned up.
I'm looking forward to it. I think the deck is powerful. I'm sure the Pro Tour will come with a nice refined version, but for now, if you miss your Siege Rhino mid-range decks, right here. It's ready to go. It's happy to spend 2 or 3 turns killing creatures and then suddenly turn the corner and attack, in like 3 turns.
Yeah. Build your own Siege Rhino.
100%.
But only with mono white.
Yeah, I can't have it all.
All right, well, Kent, thanks for joining me here in the sideboard.
No problem.
Deck looks great. Record's great so far. Stay tuned to StarCityGames.com all weekend long for the action here in Columbus.